Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. I have talked to so many of you at this point. Also, hi, if I haven't talked to you, shoot me a message. But whether it's voice memo or a DM or an email or just like random conversations I have with people about my work, at this point, there are certain phrases that when I hear them, it's like a buzzer goes off in my head. It's like ding, 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 ding. Because these phrases, they just pop up over and over and over again. And one of those phrases is people will tell me, I just want to make friends who are in the same stage of life. I just want someone who gets it. And I love that goal. I love that goal so much that is, for the most part, what I talk about here on the podcast is how we identify and get specific about the types of people that have something in common with us, that we can go connect with them and build a friendship. But recently, I have noticed in some of my conversations that people keep asking me about building friendships with people who are in different life stages. And most people are reaching out to me because of things that I've posted on my Instagram stories. I'm going to share some of those real life experiences here today, but I get messages from people being like, so how do you make those types of friends? And I think also a little bit of like, why? Why would I want to make those types of friends? Actually, I know I've gotten that question from people now that I think about it. So that's really what I want to talk about today is why might you decide that you want to make friends with someone who is in a different life stage? Now, when I sat down to think about this episode, my first thought was actually to do an episode about intergenerational friendships. And I will do some episodes on that topic specifically at some point. But the deeper I got into thinking about this and the questions that people were actually asking me, I don't think it had to do with age so much. I actually think the questions people are asking are, how are you making and maintaining friendships with people whose life circumstances are different than yours? So that could mean befriending somebody who is maybe recently divorced when I am married. Could mean befriending someone who is retired when I am still working. Befriending someone who is single when I am married. People who have kids when at this point I currently do not have kids. People want to know, like, how do I do that and why? Why are you seeking those friendships out? So that's what I want to talk about today is why might you decide to seek out someone who is in a different life stage than you are? If you go back and you listen to episode 77 with Danielle Bayard Jackson, we talk about her book, Fighting for Our Friendships. And in her book, she has a framework that she calls the 3 affinities of female friendship. Now, to my gentlemen, my non-binary listeners out there, these affinities tend to swing a certain way. Like they tend to be weighted. That's a good word. Weighted a certain way for female friendships. But that doesn't mean all these affinities aren't there. For females, some are just more important, is what research has shown. So don't write this off as like, oh, well, it's for female friendships and it doesn't apply to me. Think about how it does apply to you, because I think it's weighted differently for everybody. But in her book, the first affinity that she talks about is something called symmetry. which is that we bond with each other by assessing and establishing symmetry, which can show up as feelings of sameness, equality, and reciprocity. And sameness, which is the feeling I want to talk about today, is something that women in particular tend to greatly lean on in their friendships. Now, the research is very clear, right? It's not necessarily sameness. It's actually the perceived similarity. That's what makes us more inclined to trust another person, especially in the beginning of our friendship. So it makes sense when we are thinking about making friends and we're sitting there coming up with our filters of what we have in common, what we would even talk about, what we would share about, how we would reciprocate with each other, that we would start to think of the things that we would have in common, the sameness that we would share. But if you go back and you listen to episode 15 of the podcast, I know way back there, in that episode, I talk about how to manage differences in our friendship. Because I believe that although you might have this idea of meeting friends that have a particular symmetry as you, we are all people that are growing and changing and evolving, which means that with each new iteration of ourselves, differences will appear. Those differences, if they were not there in the beginning of your friendship, the longer you are friends with someone, the more differences will appear. And I talk in that episode about how to manage that, how to navigate that. But it got me thinking when I'm thinking about this episode, quite often I am telling you to think of the symmetry you want to find and go find it. And eventually those friendships are going to have differences. So what if we flip this all on its head? And instead, there might be times where we want to go find the differences. And then eventually, as our relationship grows, find out what our similarities are. They're both going to be there in every friendship, no matter what. We are not carbon copies of each other. You are not going to find somebody who is exactly symmetrical as you. So why might we want to go out there and find friends who are in different life stages and then find the similarities? I have 4 reasons. The first one is that there is less pressure to compare ourselves to friends who are in different life stages. The second is sharing wisdom and learning. The third is that there might, but I think there probably is more space to be yourself. And the fourth one is time. So today I want to talk through these 4 reasons with you to give you a new perspective on why you might want to seek out friends in a different life stage. And then I'll talk a little bit about where you would meet those friends. And then you're off to go out into the world and maybe give this a try. Hopefully you're inspired today. Now, the first reason I mentioned is that we might want to make friends with people who are in different life stages because there will be less pressure to compare ourselves. I think we have all had this experience where we sought out a friendship because we had some sort of symmetry in mind, right? The same life stage. And we make those friends only to get to know them and realize that they are making just very different life choices than we are. And if that is a scenario you have found yourself in, I would, again, highly suggest going back and listening to episode 15 because I talk about how to navigate that. But if you have gotten there, an example of this might be, let's say that this is actually just an example. This isn't real. Let's say that Michael and I decide to go out and buy a new car. And currently, a lot of our friends are a similar age. And some of our friends have recently bought a brand new car. So we're all hanging out, sitting on the patio, chatting, and we just casually mentioned like, yeah, we went to the dealership, we drove this car, but we decided like we have some other financial goals, so we're going to pass right now. Like our car's good. And then we all have had that experience. I know we have. I know this is universal, where our friends who recently bought the car, we weren't even talking about them. We weren't even saying anything about their choice, but they almost feel this need to defend their choice to buy a car. You know, they're like, oh, well, yeah, we're hitting our savings goals and we're doing this and we're doing that. And like, we just decided we wanted a car this year. And you didn't even bring up their new car. You weren't even thinking about their new car. But they are already feeling this pressure to be the same, right? Maybe this is also because I'm in this like mid-30s age piece where it's kind of a pressure cooker of people navigating short-term and long-term financial goals, figuring out about kids, raising kids, deciding to buy houses or cars or make big job moves or stay at home. Like we're all making these really big, impactful decisions that carry a lot of weight. And when we do that, because they feel so high pressure, high stakes, it's not even that the friends are trying to say anything about our decision or we're trying to say anything about theirs, but we're all just so up in our heads about whether or not we made the right decision that it leads us to this place where we are quick to compare ourselves because maybe our friends who bought the car are over there being like, well, we really think we should have bought the car, that we did a good thing by buying the car, that we made the right choice, that we're okay buying the car. But are we? They bring up a good point about retirement dates and savings goals. Like maybe we shouldn't have bought the car, right? That's what's going through their heads potentially. That wasn't my intention when I talked about buying the car, but we've all been in those scenarios. And if you are somebody who feels like you are in this pressure cooker or that this keeps happening to you, then it might make sense that making some friends who are actually in a different life stage would alleviate some pressure. Making some friends who are a couple decades older, who are retired, who are younger. And as you know, I don't think that everybody has to be your nearest, dearest, closest friend to have value in your life. You can go check out my Wheel of Connection for that. So they may not be your closest friends, but maybe instead of being, let's say, so hyper-focused on meeting all the neighbors who are your exact same age in your neighborhood, and they are all married and they all have kids, maybe it would actually be less pressure to befriend the retired empty nester couple down the street who comes over for barbecues. And you'd find out eventually that you have lots in common. You both traveled, maybe you before kids. I don't know. Maybe you're traveling now. I love that for you. And they're currently traveling and you want to talk about that. Maybe there's a love of cooking. Maybe there's a love of golf, whatever it is. Maybe you find these similarities and the center of your friendship might just be these backyard barbecues and a random golf game here or there, but it might actually feel like less pressure and more fun, more enjoyable than some of the friendships with people who are in your neighborhood that are in the exact same life stage. Might be worth a try. The second reason that I listed out was sharing wisdom and learning. Now, I actually do have a personal story for this one. So for a while on my Instagram stories, I was talking about this. I work from home, right? And I live in a neighborhood that is like very family oriented, but there are also a lot of retirees in the neighborhood I live in. Like it's a very established neighborhood in Seattle. People have owned their homes here for a really long time. Like there are people who live in my neighborhood who have probably owned their homes for 50 years and are now very much retired. And I always see these people and I just think to myself, like, man, there's probably some really delightful people in this neighborhood. And I talked about this a while back in my Learned Loneliness episode that I was realizing that when I work from home, now that Michael's back in the office more, I get pretty lonely Monday through Friday if I'm not super proactive about getting out of the house. So I've been trying to be more proactive and I was thinking about the types of friends I might want to add. And I realized I actually think it would be delightful to meet one retired friend, a couple retired friends, and maybe we meet up once or twice a week and go on a walk through the neighborhood. And it would get me out of the house and give me some social time. And it would get me around someone who is just living a different stage of life, has some things to teach me a little bit. Not that I'm going there. It makes me think of my grandpa who has passed away and what I wouldn't give to go meet up with him for a weekly walk. He's obviously not here, but there are probably plenty of people like him that live, honestly, on the same street as me, let alone within a few blocks. And maybe one of them would just be someone enjoyable that I could simply go on a walk with all the time. So that is actually an active friendship I am currently seeking out. Like, I have identified that I want to befriend someone in a different stage of life. And I got some messages from people when I talked about this on my Instagram saying, just like, why? And I feel like I've done a pretty decent job of explaining that to you here. But the other reason why is just like, it would be so simple, I think, and easy and endearing, and probably would remind me that I have so much life to live and I would learn some new stories of somebody else's life. I just think it would really broaden my horizons in a way that is pretty low lift in my life, right? We meet on the street corner once, twice a week, walk around for 30 minutes, and then I go back to work. Maybe I stop by and say hi every once in a while because they live in the neighborhood, or I obviously say hello if I see them out. But I don't think it needs to be some big thing. And that feels just so simple to integrate into my life right now. And I think would actually provide a lot of value. And hopefully, if I meet a delightful person that fits this description, would add some value to their life. And I think that there's some sort of, maybe it's endearing piece of this to people. And maybe it's so different. Like, I've seen plenty of viral social media stories of people who meet someone many generations older than them. And, they call them their like stand-in grandparent or their retired best friend or something like that. Like, there is this sort of, not nostalgia, I don't know how to describe it. Like, when this does happen, it draws people's attention. I think a lot more people would love this than we are openly admitting as we move through our day. And I will say, as somebody who is in my mid-30s, I also could potentially be the older, wiser one for somebody younger. Like, if I'm going to talk about, my sister is 8.5 years younger than me. We just had this conversation, her and I. She actually, how old are you, Jay? 27? She's 27. And she was telling me she has a friend who is much younger than her. And, that can sometimes be a struggle. It's a little frustrating when people are just in a different life stage. And I told her, I said, isn't there just something so nice, though, about being friends with someone who is going through something as simple as maybe navigating living on their own for the first time? That's probably the type of younger person I am age appropriately here to be the wiser one for. Let's say somebody's moving in on their own and they're so nervous about it and they don't know how to budget for it. And they don't know how to find the place. Maybe I give them a tip here or there. I don't need to lecture them, but more than anything, I can just say, like, you got this. You got this. I know you can do this. And because I have this connection with them over time, when they do sign that lease and move in and find themselves a year down the road and they're doing just fine, there's something so beautiful in being able to celebrate them and just say, hey, I knew you could do this the whole time. I'm so proud of you. Like, I trusted that you were capable. We can do that for somebody. I love doing that for my sister. So I don't know why I wouldn't love doing that for someone else in my community or my neighborhood or at work. That might be a truly delightful friendship for me to have in my life. Reason number 3, more space to be yourself. I think when we surround ourselves with people who are all in our same life circumstance, life stage, it is very easy to feel like we need to, quote unquote, act our age or act like whatever that label is. Like, it could be act your age, especially if you are maybe somebody in your 60s or your 70s. Like, I need to act my age. And that feels like a box that you're stuck in. But I think it also could be somebody, let's say a new parent, a new mom who feels like now they need to act like a mom. And I know I've had so many people tell me, like, it's sometimes nice to have childless friends because I can go out and remember that I'm more than a mom. So I think befriending people in different life stages can lead to us tapping into either like maybe ourselves overall or tapping into our piece of ourselves that we feel like we've lost, or maybe like we've never had. It could be a reason that you lean into a super unique interest of yours. I don't have this interest, but maybe it's needleworking. And I can just lean in if I go and join a needleworking group. And that group might be made up of people many decades older. Actually, JJ, sorry, that's my sister. You're really getting brought up in this episode, but I have an actual example of this. My sister wanted to learn to sew, and she signed up for a class where this delightful lady, I think maybe in her late 60s, early 70s, taught this class. And you went like once a week. She took you to the fabric store, and she took you to, I think, her basement. She taught this class in her basement. And there was like 5 or 6 people in the class. It wasn't a big group. And my sister called me and she was like, I am the youngest by many decades in this group. And I was like, I love it. I love it so freaky much. But currently, those are the people getting together to learn how to quilt. Not to say that every person quilting is of a certain age, but maybe fewer and far between. It just allowed my sister to like fully lean into that piece of herself. Something else I've talked about on my Instagram, I need to get back to this, but I really like water aerobics. And so I've been going to the water aerobics classes at the community pool in my neighborhood. And I normally go to, I think they're at like 10:30 in the morning. So it's a lot of retirees in the class. It's super fun. I'm truly the youngest person when I go, normally by multiple decades. And I just like chat it up with people. I think they all think I'm, like, what am I doing there? I'm the only one. I'm the only one under maybe 60, for sure 50, but maybe 60. But I have fun doing water aerobics. And the joy in that is that if I make connections in there, it's not like I need to look for that sameness with these people with every interest in my life. It doesn't really matter. I can just show up and I can enjoy the one interest. I don't need to compare myself. We can just really lean into this one thing and allow it to be what it is. And that's great. And we don't need to pressure ourselves to do all these other things. One more example of the more space to be yourself. So I've been thinking about this recently, that it's not like I want to go out and hit up the nightlife per se. I'm not really a drinker. I like to dance, but Michael likes to dance way more than I do. But I have been having this moment recently where I'm like, I don't know, all these people my age are like, nobody wants to go out. Nobody wants to hit up any sort of dancing, maybe a show, maybe. But recently I was like, man, what I wouldn't give to just make a fun friend that would invite me out every once in a while to go out on a Saturday night. Would I do that often? No, probably not. Probably 3 to 4 times a year. But I just think it'd be kind of fun. And a lot of my friends aren't that interested in doing that at this point. So that would be a delightful person for me to meet right now. Somebody who, quote unquote, that's not me really acting my age anymore. But that 20-something person would not care. The fourth reason I have for why you might want to meet somebody and make a friend in a different life stage is time. And I think that this one, at first, people are going to be like, what do you mean? The examples I'm going to use in this one are very kid focused, because when I think about time and why you might want to make friends in different life stages, the most, I would say, I believe studies show this if I go and look it up, the most time scarce people are the people, honestly, in my age group right now, the people who are parenting young children while trying to juggle a career, the responsibilities of running a household. And then you add in things like health or friendships or a hobby, a freaking hobby. And that's a lot to juggle. Things get sidelined. And then you have all these people out here telling me, I want to meet other friends who are in the exact same life stage as me, because we think that it will be easier to get together when there are a bunch of kids and everybody's kind of doing the same activities. And in some senses, Yes, that is easier. It is also, I think, less vulnerable. And that's why people want that sameness. Because from firsthand experience, as someone who currently does not have kids, there's a lot of vulnerability to hanging out with my parent friends and their children. Like, I get that and I want to acknowledge that. But I actually think that in a lot of ways, it is easier that Michael and I don't have kids because we have more time flexibility. So our friends can basically just say, oh, we have a nap at this time. We have lunch at this time. We have to go here at this time. And we're like, yeah, sure. Because we don't have a kid as well who has a slightly different nap schedule and won't eat those things for lunch. Like, we're able to just kind of fold in on our friends' timeline. And that, I think, a lot of times actually makes it easier if you can push through the vulnerability piece. Like, an example of this is I have a friend, I've talked about this on my Instagram. She's a stay-at-home mom. They moved to the burbs from the city. So it's like a 45-minute drive for me. And we see them pretty regularly, but I try and make a point once a month to go down and hang out with her on a weekday. That's obviously something that my work life allows for, the flexibility to do that. But it's nice for her because that's obviously a day where she would be kind of just like in the routine with the kids. I go down and I just do whatever they're going to do for the day. Sometimes that means we go to Little Gym or we go to story time at the library or we go on a walk in the neighborhood. Sometimes we go run an errand and do some returns or pick up groceries. We play in the backyard. My friend and I hang out and sit on the couch and chat when the little girls' nap times overlap, when like that miracle happens. And other times we're sitting on the floor, kind of having these chopped up conversations between playing with dolls and reading books. We make it work. And the reason we can do that is because I don't have the same time constraints. And because we're both willing to navigate the vulnerability required to spend time together when we are in very different life stages. And I know that this is wild because she always tells me all the stories. Like, she'll mention to the other moms in the neighborhood that I'm coming down and they're like, what do you guys even do together? She's like, whatever I'm going to do today. Like, that's what Alex does with us. Or what's some other things they've said? Like, I can't even imagine having a friend that doesn't have kids that would come hang out today. It's like, I want to live in a world where we can do this because I know for a fact that other friends of ours that have kids where those competing nap schedules and things like I mentioned, like sometimes they have a harder time than we do. And the only thing we had to overcome was the vulnerability piece, not the time piece. Now, that's not to say that I think every parent should just have a bunch of childless friends. I think there is so much freaking value in having people, again, who just get it, get what it is like. It can't be one or the other, but I do think it can be both. And I think that creates a really beautiful friendship landscape that is easier to piece together in the current life stage that is parenting small children. Now, I've obviously talked about the child-free and parents, but some other examples of this would be maybe your parents, new parents in a neighborhood of small kids. And it would be lovely to meet some maybe empty nesters on your street. Or there is that lady who has been single but seems to love kids, and you could meet up at the neighborhood park. Or she could join in for that walk. Or she could come over and play in the backyard every once in a while. It could be somebody that is younger than you and would love to be a parent someday. That's just not currently the life stage they're in and would love to come hang out with your family. You know, something I think about a lot. I understand that what I'm about to talk about was my job. But when I nannied in college, I loved getting to go to someone's home. We don't talk about this enough. I loved getting to go to someone's home and get out of my either dorm room or college house and be like in a real house, not something that was like piecemealed together with a bunch of random Goodwill furniture, like a real house. that felt like a home. And I loved getting to sit around in their backyard and hang out. So it could just be that you have somebody in your neighborhood who maybe likes kids and would love to, again, come hang out in the backyard with you or go on a walk with you every once in a while. They get along with your kids, they play with them, and it's not necessarily even about babysitting or nannying or childcare. It's just about somebody that's enjoyable to be around. There are so many other reasons for time in different life stages. I'll have to come up with some more examples, but I do think, especially for those of you out there navigating like deep in the depths of parenting, this is one you should really consider. Because although you also need the mom friends, the dad friends, the parent friends, there, I think, is really space out there, if you start thinking about it, for people in these different life stages that could really fill in a simpler, easier way for you in this current life stage. So, how are you doing this? How are you making friends in different life stages? Because so often we meet people in the places that we frequent, right? You meet someone somewhere and you become friends over time. So if you are a retiree, you might be meeting people at those aquatics classes. If you are a parent, you might be meeting other parents at your kids' sports games, right? You go somewhere you frequent that centers around this similar life stage that you are in, and then you make friends there. So what do you do when you want to make friends who are in a different life stage? And my answer to that would be that you need to start putting yourselves out there in some of the simpler places, like your neighborhood, work, friends of friends, family friends, religious communities, professional societies. Like if you are out and about in your neighborhood, broadening your horizons to who you're paying attention to or who you invite over for a chat, who you stop and say hello to, and work. Again, friends of friends, family friends. So while you're out in the world, just being a little more open that although that initial sameness isn't there, there might be a lot more sameness or a really beautiful reason to navigate the different life stage with this person that you just hadn't thought of before. Now, the second option is to just be more proactive about it, to decide you want a certain type of friend and then go to the place where they are. So this would be like me deciding that I would love to meet somebody in my neighborhood who is of that retirement age and deciding that I'm going to go to weekly aquatics classes because I enjoy that interest and I'm going to make a point of chatting with people. Doing it this way is a little more direct. It might be a little more uncomfortable. Like, I'm not going to lie, it was a little uncomfortable to realize that I am many decades younger than everybody in the aquatics class. And I had to kind of laugh about it. And I had to remind myself of why I'm there. But of course, the more I have gone to the class, the less uncomfortable it has gotten. But I do think that sometimes, not always, sometimes being more direct about it and putting yourself in those places could expedite these connections. And remember, as I send you off with this new perspective, so you can go walk through your days and just consider connecting with some new people that you wouldn't otherwise connect with, remember that not everyone has to be your closest, deepest friend. Now, they might be over time, who knows? But nobody starts out that way. And there is so much value in even our simplest of connections. They might be the perfect person that you've been missing for something very specific in your life. And isn't that worth it? Isn't that worth adding to your life and to their life if it fits a need that you just haven't really found filled any other way? Like if I look at my walking friend example, currently none of our closest friends live nearby. Some of them do work from home, but it would be kind of complicated to meet up in the middle of the day for a walk with like each other's meeting schedules. Like this would be a real thing for me to try and find with my current friends. But if I open myself up to somebody who is retired and has way more time flexibility even than I do, which is a lot of time flexibility, they might fill this exact need I have to get out of my house and chat with somebody a couple days a week for about 30 minutes. They might add a little color to my life. And isn't that connection worth it? Because I'd say it is. And I hope you spend some time thinking about connections that might be worth it for you and approaching those connections, even though it seems like they're different up front, and navigating those differences so you can find the similarities down the line. With that, I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle at it's Alex Alexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.